Hey guys, Pro1701 here, and today I have a patron video actually that I'll be talking about. One of my patrons requested this video, and the video is the E-Space Trilogy versus the Black Guardian Trilogy, which is an interesting video. I liked the idea when I was reading his message about it, and it's interesting that while Doctor Who didn't do seasonal arcs a whole lot in the classic series, that we did have kind of three of these trilogies, kind of mini seasonal arcs, pop up within just a couple years of each other. We had, well, one in season 18, one in season 18 running into 19, and then one in season 20. That's really interesting. The E-Space Trilogy, I think, is a trilogy in a very loose sense. For me, the main thing bringing them together is the fact that the Doctor and Romana are stuck in E-Space and trying to find a way out. Because I do really think of these as three separate stories. So kind of like the opposite of Flux, which is 6 parts of one story. These are three separate stories, very loosely connected with the fact they're stuck in E-Space. So they are a loose. Even I think of these even less as being connected to, say, the Key to Time. And I find the Key to Time to be pretty much 6 individual stories with the whole seasonal arc of collecting the key pieces, connecting them. This is even less. They just happen to be stuck in E-Space trying to get out. Now, in the Black Guardian trilogy, on the other hand, from season 20, I think is a little more interconnected. They definitely have their own standalone stories. They do. I still think of them as separate stories, but they feel a lot more interconnected with everything going on with the Black Guardian and Turlough really grounding that. And seeing Turlough as he just realizes the situation he's gotten himself into and trying to free himself from the Black Guardian, which is a wonderful performance from Mark Strickson, and a wonderful performance from Valentine as the Black Guardian. That voice of his is just amazing. The Black Guardian trilogy I've actually watched recently. I just watched Maldron Undead the other day and got a review out for that, or got a review done for that. It should be going live tomorrow when I'm recording this, I believe. Lost my train of thought. But Maldron Undead I really liked. And then Terminus and Enlightenment I've also watched this year, so they're still pretty fresh on my mind, at least as fresh as Terminus can be on anyone's mind. It's so forgettable. Maldron Undead I really like, but I don't quite think it's as good as a lot of people do. And a lot of people seem to think it's the highlight of the Black Guardian trilogy. I disagree. I like it. It's good to see Nicholas Courtney back. He's great in it, maybe a little over the top once or twice, but he's really good in it. He does a good job of playing the two Brigadiers slightly differently in the way he moves and the way he talks, and of course the way he's done up. That works really well. It's a good story. I have a little issue with the design of the scientists. That little cap on their head really puts me off. I don't know why. If that little... I just don't like it. It really puts me off the story, which is a shame. It is a good story, that kind of Flying Dutchman tale. It's a really solid story that's executed pretty well. I just have a couple little nitpicks that hurt me on it. And then you have Terminus, which isn't bad. I don't think Terminus is bad. It's just so forgettable. When I was doing my review of Terminus, I knew I had seen Terminus before, but all I really remembered was Nyssa leaving. And it was on, like, a prison thing, which it isn't quite, but it kind of is. And I think I remembered it tying in with the Big Bang, which it does. That's really about all I remembered. I don't know how I'd forgotten that the whole plot of the story seems to be trying to get Sarah Sutton out of as much of her clothes as possible. Because, my goodness, does she lose her clothes, like, at an alarming rate. Maybe alarming is not the right word. And then there's a couple camera angles that... like when she's on the ground unconscious and the camera is, well, I'm looking forward to when that season comes out and the behind the scene, watching the behind the sofa behind that, because I have a feeling they're going to have a good chuckle about that. It isn't bad, it's just very forgettable. It's not one of those stories where I'm like, my goodness, I should watch Terminus. It's more, Man, I haven't watched Terminus in a decade or so. What the heck happened in Terminus? So it's definitely the weakest of the three. And then there's Enlightenment. What really helps Enlightenment for me, besides the fact it is a good story, is the special edition. I don't like that the special edition is in widescreen. That's a little irksome. But the actual effects they use look phenomenal. They don't look 2021 great, but they look really good. And it's not so much the technology of the effects as the direction they do the effect. They take some artistic license, and instead of trying to recreate shots but with better looking CG, they really let their imagination stretch, and they do different things. You have these nice sweeping shots where you see all the ships and when it's bouncing off the sun. You know, they really, much like with Macroterra, how Macroterra took liberties and created a phenomenal product. Here, when they're doing the space shots of the ships and everything in the race, they take a lot of liberties, and it really pays off, and you kind of get this scope of what they would have done with the original production had they had the technology and the budget to do so. And I think that's what bolsters Enlightenment and makes it my favorite story of the season. I think if I only had the standard version of Enlightenment, Maldron Undead probably would be my favorite, but with the special edition, which just to me looks gorgeous and is a good story, and I really like how some of the focus is on Tegan here. Excuse me, because I like Tegan. I think it's really well done. I don't think any of those stories are masterpieces. I think Enlightenment is good. I don't even know if I'd call any of them classics. Maybe Maldron Undead a classic, even though I like Enlightenment more. I think I'd argue more for Maldron Undead being a classic than Enlightenment, but that's more because the brig is there, and on paper it probably has the better story as well. Now, going back to the E-Space Trilogy, you have Full Circle, which I think is the weakest of the three, but it's still good. Full Circle is an interesting one, because the first time I watched it, I didn't really care for it. But having rewatched it a couple times, it's grown on me. It's a lot like Stones of Blood. When I talk about Stones of Blood, I talk about how Stones of Blood's an interesting one, because there are aspects to that story I really don't like. And then there are aspects to that story that I really, really like. So there's a lot of and a lot of yeah. It's kind of like that with Full Circle. There's not a lot I just don't like. The thing with Romana being controlled by the bug irritates me. I don't like that. But most of what I don't like about Full Circle would be just stuff I find meh. It's not that I don't like it, I just find it uninteresting. Whereas there are parts of Full Circle I find fascinating. Like, I actually really like Adric in this. Adric tends to be really good with Tom. I don't find him bothersome until he's with Peter. He's written a lot better in Season 18, in my opinion. I really like him in this. I really like when Tom figures out what they're doing with the ship, with the repairing and disrepairing and all of that, and what they're doing to buy time. I love the idea behind that. And just watching Tom confront them, trying to figure out what's actually going on with the evolution. It's like, while I'm watching it, I kind of get it, but once it's over, I forget. I don't quite... The way that circle works is a little weird to me. Moving on to State of Decay. I think State of Decay is a masterpiece. I'm not going to go on about State of Decay. I've talked about State of Decay enough on this channel that most of my regular viewers know I love State of Decay. I think it is the masterpiece of Season 18. I think it's one of Tom Baker's best stories, actually. I absolutely love State of Decay. State of Decay would fit right in at home in Season 13, Season 14, or even Season 15. It would fit snug in there. In Season 18, it's a little out of place because it does go for that gothic horror, which is not Season 18 at all. But partially because of that, it really is the standout shining jewel of Season 18. I love the story. I love the performances. I love the reveal about what's going on with the castle and the people in the castle. Aside from some ropey effects right at the end, I think it is a bona fide classic, a bona fide masterpiece. I am in love with that story. And then you have Warrior's Gate, which I also really like. And I think you could argue it's a masterpiece. I don't quite think it's a masterpiece, but I do think it's a classic. And the more I think about it, the more I consider Warrior's Gate essential viewing. Because Warrior's Gate is a fascinating story just in and of itself. It's a little hard to follow, much like, say, Ghostlight. I could see it requiring multiple viewings. One of the fascinating things about Ghostlight is its execution. because I think it's executed really well. But it's one of those stories that I think the decade it's made in is going to determine what its execution looks like. It really is one of those very... it's very mental. It's a very mental story. And I think if it had been made, say, in the early 60s or mid-60s, it would look different. If it was made in the early or mid-70s, it would look different. If it was made in the mid-90s, like the TV movie time, it would look different. If it was made during the Russell T. Davis era, it would look different. If it was made during Moffat's era, it would look different. If it was made today, it would look different. So that one is really just how it would look visually would depend on which decade it was made in. And it really does go kind of for that minimalist approach like the Mind Robber does, which, again, like the Mind Robber, for Classic Who on Classic Who's budget, it pulls it off beautifully. I love the scenes when they're walking around in the mirror and it's got that kind of black and white background with them walking on. The CSO is actually really good there with the black and white background. I love that. And them disappearing in and out of the mirror I find absolutely fascinating. The thralls or thals or whatever they're called running around, I find them, their race and their history and what happened with them and how they went from being basically like conquerors to being servants the way they are. I find that fascinating. Seeing Tom in the room with all the cobwebs and skeletons and flashing back to when everyone was still alive is neat. And when they're telling him, I forget what the speech was, and he's just like, yes, and he knocks the cup over. That's so the Doctor. That's so the Doctor to a T. And I'm so there for it. The human characters are a little two-dimensional. If I have any nitpicks, is I feel the human characters aren't very fleshed out. The Captain feels very two-dimensional especially. I don't really think much of them. But that aside, it's a great final story for Romana. She gets a lot to do here. She's very pivotal to the story. She does a lot in the story. I really think they give her a really good exit here. I really like Warrior's Gate. All of that being said, I think it's probably no surprise that between the two trilogies, to be fair, as much as I prefer the E-Space Trilogy, because I do, between the Black Guardian Trilogy and the E-Space Trilogy, I do think the E-Space Trilogy wins. Again, calling it a trilogy, it's very loosely connected, though. I personally think that Keeper of Traken, Legopolis, and Castrovalva make a much better trilogy. The New Beginnings trilogy might... I can't really get to it. Let's see. The box set I have on DVD here in Region 1 calls it New Beginning, and it's got Keeper of Traken, Legopolis, and Castrovalva, with all 3 DVDs in there. They even sell it as a trilogy here in the US. And that's kind of what I call it, the New Beginning trilogy, because of that. But for me, at least from a narrative standpoint, that makes a much better trilogy than the E-Space Trilogy, because all 3 of the stories really interconnect. Keeper of Traken, Legopolis, and Castrovalva all really interconnect with each other. Because everything that's happening in Keeper of Traken leads into events happening into Legopolis, which lead literally directly into the events of Castrovalva. So they're all influencing each other. So personally, I consider these 3 stories more of a trilogy than I actually do the E-Space Trilogy, which is mostly just loosely connected because they're lost in E-Space trying to get out and have adventures while they're there. But if I'm looking at just ranking the Black Guardian Trilogy and the E-Space Trilogy, I prefer the E-Space Trilogy because it has one story I think is okay to good, one story I think is a masterpiece, and another story that I think, if not a masterpiece, then at least a classic and essential viewing. Whereas in the Black Guardian Trilogy has one I think is really good, really good, great even, one I think is extremely forgettable, and one that I think is great. Don't know about classic, but great. So that is my thoughts on that. I would like to know what you think of these 3 trilogies, a trilogy of trilogies. Haha. Comment down below and let me know. I always enjoy hearing from you guys. Other things to do, click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications so you never miss out on another video. I have crossed over 600 subscribers recently. Thank you for everyone who has subscribed. My goal now is to hit 1,000. I'm really looking forward to getting that. It'll probably be a while, but I'm looking forward to getting to that. So if you like my channel and haven't subscribed yet, I'd love for you to click that button and click that bell for notifications. I also have a Patreon. This video was actually requested by a patron, and it was a wonderful idea I wouldn't have thought of, so I'm very grateful to him. I also want to say a special thank you to him. He calls himself the Fifth Doctor. I have 2 subscribers named that. One spells it out fifth. One is just the number fifth. 5 with a TH. So I want to give a special thank you to him, and a shout out and a special thank you to all of my patrons. I just got another one recently. It was JBLWHO, JBLWHO. Want to thank him and welcome him as well. He's been one of my subscribers for a while. We've interacted, commented several times. He joined my Patreon recently. Thank you for that. I've got a couple polls up if you want to join. One is voting on a classic Doctor Who review I'll be doing exclusive to my patrons. Anyway, most importantly, thank you for watching. Hey guys, Pro1701 here, and today this is a patron video we're actually going to be talking about. Wait a minute, let's do that again. And a 10th Doctor review, a poll for that this is really coming out bad. Okay, I think I'm out of gas. I'm just going to leave that at that. I suddenly feel like I just aged like 10 years in a minute.